think about it, dude.
Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by the fine members over at the grandtheftworld.com members room. Thanks for everyone for showing up for tonight's live show. We are coming to you tonight at the speed of science. This is episode 103. It is October 23rd, 2022. We have a plethora of stories tonight, a cornucopia of content that we're going to unfold over the next 6 or 7 hours with analysis and some historical deep dives so you can understand the context, make better decisions during the week. We're going to cover stories like just when you thought the pandemic was over. You know, last pandemic, COVID killed 1%, generous number. They had to go and do the new and improved thing. Now the Boston COVID lab has one that's 80% effective, you might say. If the goal was mortality, they've raised it through gain of function to 80%. We're going to dig into that very concerning story tonight. Why are they still doing these types of experiments? Why are they doing research like this in America at all? Do we have to do it before the enemy does it? Or are these types of uses of science without consciousness, without conscience? Might that be the real type of terrorism out there? We'll get into that story. We also have stories like the CDC is back and they got a new and improved plan for your child's immune system. And that pandemic that killed 1% of adults and didn't really touch children, well, the kids are going to have to get jabbed to get a public school government education. If they want to participate in society, they got to take the experimental gene synthetic concoction that they're giving people. And I think that's also likewise very concerning. So these regulatory groups that are making decisions from on high, I think we have to learn how to challenge them, and we can't challenge them until we get to the news about what they're doing, and then we can make some intellectual decisions from there. We also have a story that I would like to call the apotheosis of Alex Jones. It's an example of what happens when society decides to attack somebody who's become, over the years, anti-fragile. Through all the attacks, he's just getting stronger and stronger. And while they laid a decision, they hope to get $2.78 trillion from Mr. Jones. I think what they've done is jump the shark. They've just shown everybody it's not about justice for the tragedies that befell those families, but rather it's about money, power, politics, and it's getting pretty ugly with the egregious nature of these rewards, these awards, because when you compare it to other corporations in history, and Union Carbide killed 100,000 people in India, do they have to pay $2.78 trillion? I don't think so. So all these mega corporations with corporate personhood, they can go out and commit mass murder and genocide and not be held accountable. And some guy in Texas who moves his mouth the wrong way, $2.78 trillion. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to get into some incendiary comments made against the Israelites and Hebrews this week. We'll get to Ye, but there was also Ethan Klein, who had some very caustic words leveled at Ben Shapiro, who I'm not really a fan of, but I'm a fan of humanity. And when you're expressing yourself in inhumane or unhuman ways, I think it deserves notice. I think it deserves analysis. I think it deserves people recognizing who's protected by YouTube and Susan Wojcicki, and who's banned and censored and canceled because Klein is preserved in that YouTube infrastructure, and other people who say things that are less incendiary get deep six. So we're going to get into stories like that. Also tonight, sitting in second chair, we've got the host of the Rebunk podcast, Scott Armstrong. Scotty, how you doing?
Well, Richard, I'm doing pretty fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. Hope Tony's getting some relaxation this evening. And yeah, man, honored to be here.
Yeah, Tony's got some R&R, so we asked Scott to sit in. So we're going to be having some fresh perspectives on some of these stories. And also, Ryan Christian might pop in later, earlier, sooner. We don't know. You'll have to stay tuned while we go to tonight's stories. And we might also get to a clip from the first week of Jay Dyer's Philosophy 101 course. It's currently in production. We might have a little sample because I did see a sample of it air in another podcast over the weekend, so we might be able to play that. It's going to get really exciting. Be sure to hang out. We're going to go first to Luke Radowski of thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and we'll be right back after his weekly summary.
Wow, absolutely crazy footage coming out of Ukraine, and who would have thought? Even Russian fighter pilot jets need dash cams in their vehicles. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Radowski here of WeAreChange.org, and we have a lot of very serious news to get into today, as of course there's a lot of things happening here domestically inside of the United States that show a very troubling sign for political discourse, similar to, of course, to what just happened in China. Are we there yet? Well, we're going to be asking that question later on today, as well as, more importantly, giving you a bigger update on the proxy conflict between, of course, the East and the West. Lots of crazy news to get into there. Lots of corruption, crazy predictions by Dr. Doom, and now, as of today, in the making of this video, Russia warning about, quote, uncontrolled escalations. What are they talking about? Well, we're going to be describing that plus a lot more here in this independent media broadcast. But before we begin, the clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast was a clip that I just saw on Reddit being shared around widely of a Russian Su-25 fighter jet being shot down over Ukraine. Crazy footage, insane footage, giving you a small window to see the intensity of war that a lot of people face there every single day. Insanity brought to us by politicians that, of course, are taking your money and then blowing up fighter jets with them. Very expensive fighter jets, just like very expensive San Francisco public bathrooms, as we found out today from the local Fox affiliate in San Francisco, that the city there is building one single public toilet that will cost the taxpayer there $1.7 million, and to add insult to injury, won't even be completed until 2025. This showing you the perfect representation of a big bureaucratic state that loves to spend your money, as the representative from that very corrupted, bureaucratic, mafia-esque jurisdiction came out today, one of the richest people in the world, one of the best stock traders, better than Warren Buffett himself, Nancy Pelosi, came out and literally tried to say that we need to change the subject on inflation. Inflation that, of course, is caused by governments printing money, spending money that they don't have, which, of course, devalues the purchasing power of the dollar because there's too many in circulation that the government just willy-nilly prints out of nowhere. Actions partly orchestrated by Nancy Pelosi, who said this today.
Is that when I hear people talk about inflation, as I heard him there, we have to change that subject.
Yeah, that would be very convenient, as, of course, inflation has hit so high that even family members are demanding trillions of dollars, specifically $2.7 trillion from a radio talk show host that dared to express some opinions that I personally didn't agree with myself, statements and assertions I didn't agree with myself, but I think it's fair to say that it's a bit egregious to be penalized nearly $1 billion, with other parties now demanding $2.7 trillion for simply expressing unpopular ideas. As of course, a lot of people see this as a mainly politically motivated trial, just like the trial of Steve Bannon, another individual who was just sentenced to 4 months in prison for the crime of being held contempt of Congress. Now, it's also important to note that a lot of people routinely are held in contempt of Congress. Bill Maher, Eric Holder, Janet Reno, Henry Kissinger, to name a few. And yet they never were sentenced, never went on trial, and never punished, just like Steve Bannon was and sent to a jail for 4 months for what is shaping up to be a political show trial, just like they have in China, where the Communist political party faithfully just endorsed Xi Jinping's core policies and positions while approving a sweeping reshuffling that not only had his rival step down, but literally be escorted out of the building. This as, of course, the current president of China was just reelected for a third term and most likely will be the leader of China for many years to come, as, of course, he is galvanizing control of that country under his thumb. This as, of course, many multinational Western corporations and billionaire thought leaders usually like to congratulate and thank China for all the work that they've been doing and see them as an inspiration for a society that they're trying to set up here. Will they be successful? Well, I think it's worth asking, will you allow this to happen? Will you speak out against this, or will you be silenced? Well, that's a question that I think a lot of people should be asking themselves, as I think it's fair to say that we're slowly ever encroaching a Chinese totalitarian society that, of course, tries to stifle out any kind of critical thinking, which perfectly represents the shirt that I'm wearing right now, which you could get on thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Now, very interestingly, CBS News came out with a report just moments ago talking about how the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Unit is practicing for war with Russia just miles away from the Ukrainian border. And in this specific video report, they detailed that these drills, these practices are, quote, not just about defending NATO territory, and then went on to detail how specifically the U.S. military is, quote, fully prepared to cross over into Ukrainian territory, leaving a lot of people watching this news broadcast saying to themselves, why? Why are we doing this? What's the strategy here? What's the geopolitical objective? What's the larger goal here? Well, I haven't heard any, especially when it comes from the U.S. military leaders, especially when it comes to the politicians setting up these policies, setting up these war games, setting up these drills, sending tons of weaponry into a conflict that represents a larger proxy conflict, and with more arms being sent, the more likelihood that this conflict will be prolonged. And with this prolonging of this conflict faces a lot of consequences. Consequences that I think a lot of Americans should be asking themselves, as of course there is a lot of corruption with all the parties involved here, specifically the Ukrainians, the Russians, which the Biden family has been doing extensive business deals with to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. Hunter Biden's real estate company received $40 million in investment from a Russian oligarch. Joe Biden's son was working for Burisma Oil, a nationalized energy company in Ukraine that clearly was spending way too much money for him for unspecified, unknown reasons. So when aggressive policies are put into play and there's no reason for them actually given, we should be asking ourselves what's really going on here, as of course there's a high degree of corruption being possible here. This, as of course there's a lot of stake here, as even an NYU economics professor and CEO of a consulting company is coming out today and predicting a nuclear attack from Russia, specifically impacting one of America's largest cities, New York City. This Dr. Doom specifically saying that this is going to happen within the next 2 decades. By the way, this is also the same man who 16 years ago correctly predicted the collapse of the housing market and the emerging of a worldwide recession, which he's been right about. And we have to ask ourselves, is this Dr. Doom being a negative Nancy, or is he reading the writing on the walls? Well, only time will tell, and we'll be able to find out if his prediction was accurate. And all of this is happening as, very interestingly, there has been a lot of communication between Russia and the United States, with specific phone calls between the defense ministers and secretaries. All of this as there has been a lot of chatter and conversation specifically about false flag attacks. Russia is saying the United States and Ukraine will set one off, while of course the United States is saying Russia will set one off. As of course specifically there's a talk of a major dam being destroyed in the south of Ukraine, which would flood a major portion of the territory there, unleashing what is being described as 8 million tons of water, which of course would negatively affect the energy sector of Ukraine, which already is being targeted and hit by the Russians, as already 1/3 of the power grid in Ukraine has been taken offline, as we're also finding out that 90% of wind power, solar power facilities have been destroyed during this large conflict, which I want to talk about in just a little bit, as of course it's also important to note here that as of today the Russians are making new allegations as they are informing a bunch of Western nations that Ukraine will plan to, quote, detonate a dirty nuclear bomb on its territory. Ukraine is, of course, denying this larger allegation, but whether these allegations are true or not, they are paving the groundwork for what is clearly the larger possibility of a nuclear bomb going off in that country, which of course would change things very dramatically. With specifically the Russian defense minister coming out and saying that the situation in Ukraine is deteriorating and, quote, trending towards uncontrolled escalations, and whether it's going to be a false flag attack, a real attack, we don't know exactly what's happening. There's a thing called fog of war. Truth is usually the first casualty of war, but seeing this rhetoric, seeing the groundwork being laid down, highlights some very troubling news when it comes to this entire conflict, which is sure bound to be escalated, as there is no one and nothing trying to de-escalate it. Right now, I think it's fair to say that we're seeing a war of attrition being launched against the Ukrainians and the Russians. The Russians specifically are now having their supply of Iranian drones being targeted, as we're learning today that there was an Israeli-linked airstrike that hit an Iranian drone factory. Iranian drones that have been having a lot of success for the Russians inside of Ukraine. The Russians have been predominantly targeting the infrastructure now of Ukraine, and regardless of what your political perspective, where you stand on this issue, or who you're rooting for, it doesn't matter. I think it's fair to say that this is absolutely insane, unnecessary. What's the purpose here? What's the goal here? Why aren't there any de-escalations? Why aren't there any negotiations? There's none of that, and I think it's fair to say that we are on a pathway that makes you consider that Dr. Doomsday might not be that far off when it comes to his far-fetched prediction that we talked about earlier in this broadcast. What do you think? Is he being a negative Nancy? Or is he being realistic? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Press 1 if you think negative Nancy. Press 2 if you think he's seeing things correctly here on the ground. I'm very curious to see what you guys think. He definitely is providing some very interesting perspectives on this entire topic, which I think we should realize when it comes to the larger circumstances involving everything and everyone when it comes to this proxy war. What will happen?
A lot of concerning news there that Luke's bringing to the table. First off, I thought we were seeing some scene on a Red Dawn at the beginning. You know, you see some parachute dropping from the air. I was like, what's this? Oh, that's just the war going on over there that should have been over in April when they tried to have peace. But then the British Prime Minister, who's no longer there, came in and said, you can't have that. Boris Johnson said, you can't have peace. We got to keep the war going, because the United States and the UK, they're the world's biggest arms dealers. They don't just milk the citizens for the tax money. They also got some arms dealing on the side. Now, for the past 2 weeks, you've got 4 hours of content into the they, them, those, naming the names. Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail, covers all the Iran-Contra criminals, all the BCCI criminals, all the stuff that led up to Epstein's modern network. And with him gone, that network still operates. He's the front man. He's not the people behind it. He's not the people wiring the houses, collecting the data, storing the data, doing the blackmail. He's the guy. He's the maitre d' of the thing. And it's still going on out there. So World War III brewing that shouldn't be going on. A lot of criminals running rampant who should be accountable to justice. And meanwhile, you know, society's distracted because Ye and Alex Jones said some mean words, which I don't think people should say mean words. I don't think they should have meanness or hatred in their heart, but I can't control everybody. I'm not looking to. I'm just looking to be me. So commenting on that first story, what do you think, Scott? Is there anything concerning in Luke's report for Sunday? Oh, you're muted.
Mute.
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay. Rookie mistake. So yeah, I mean, just his sentiment at the end there is really just, you know, just loud and clear. Like, why is nobody asking for any sort of de-escalation? Why isn't there like any sort of movement towards like a solution to this problem, you know, which tells you everything you need to know. Like, this is a contrived thing that people are profiting from, and people are this parasite class is reveling in the fact that this is happening. Like they're getting everything that they need. They're getting their weapons. They're getting all their money laundering happening. It's just insane, man. It's been hard for me to follow this story because it's so contrived and just like not everything from the very beginning. It's just been like one deception after another, to just drive this narrative home. And it's just the propaganda around it's just like, it's so demoralizing, honestly, in a lot of ways. It's just like, can't we just get past this? Is there any way out of this other than some sort of nuclear conflict? Like why is that even a part of the discussion? And it's just so maddening. And then, man, it aggravates me really, like I wish we could just go back to the days of just rallying against all these wars. Why can't we just go back to the good old days of just like protesting wars and stuff? But no.
Well, because the anti-war group's in power right now. So now they're pro-war.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Kind of how that works. Now I was thinking maybe because Boris Johnson had told Ukraine, like, you guys got to keep the war going in April, and Boris Johnson's out. I was hoping that Liz Truss, the UK prime minister, the shortest duration of UK prime ministership in history, she lasted 6 weeks before she had to resign. I was hoping she was going to fix it. Not really. I wasn't that naive, but I'm just saying, like, maybe they'll end World War III and a woman stopped it, but she was like, I can't stop this, or she's not going to, or it's not, whatever. Her orders were otherwise, and they fired her. And now we're going to see what the next prime minister does. Now we have a United States president that's got everyone in America all Ukraine flagged up for the past almost a year now. It's probably been 9 months. And the enormous amount of U.S. taxpayer funding that has gone over to Ukraine, just because U.S. is in NATO, basically, that's the justification. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sending any money over to Ukraine because historically, we take care of our own people, or that's what the tax dollars are supposed to be used for in the Schoolhouse Rock version of how things work, right?
Yeah.
So it's concerning to see that they just keep dumping more money into that situation over there. It's almost like putting more wood on the fire, and we're hoping the fire is going to go out. And they're like, no, we're trying to make it bigger. And to us, it's like bigger means nuclear weapons in World War III. And we're really trying to avoid that. And they're like, no, let's make it bigger. So this is like the modern generation of the people who developed nuclear weapons in the first place, when they thought it might, just light up the whole atmosphere and incendiary, make Earth go up like a candle. And they did it anyway. Are those same type of Dr. Strangelove characters running the show today in the name of $ science? I don't know.
The other thing that's so crazy too is like, okay, so another part that just lends itself to the contrived, just like fictional nature. I don't want to say fictional, but just like, okay, so like, how is America sending billions of dollars to Ukraine not an act of war? Like, how is Russia not responding to the fact that we are giving them money? And now in the story that Luke was talking about is now there's reports of like these, U.S. military people like right there on the front lines. Like, how are these not considered acts of war? How are these like not considered things that they are going to then retaliate against? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, the side doing the aggression disguises their aggression by redefining the words. And that's why you got to look outside of just one country's narrative on things and say, look, this is how this NATO sees it this way. The Russians see it this way. India sees it this way, right? Take the, like, I like to look at countries and what they're saying. They don't have anything to do with it, because then they're rational. They're logical. They're not making any money from the arms deals. They're not getting any money from the lobbyists. They don't have any part of the corporate corruption chain that goes back 60 years in this country. So you can get a better feel for information by not just listening to one or the other, but like by passing it around, checking out.
Yeah, definitely. We got Big Ryan in the house. Looks like, hey.
Yeah, so he's going to watch. He'll watch Christy Lee with us, and then we can talk about that.
Cool.
All right, so control room. We're going to go to Christy Lee's This Week in Media Malfeasance, and then when we come back, we'll get fact up with Ryan. Let's get fact up on GTW. We'll be right back.
This week, the CDC Independent Advisory Board unanimously voted to put the COVID-19 mRNA jabs on the 2023 vaccine schedule, despite a massive public outcry to not include them. The board responded by saying just because they're added to the schedule doesn't mean it will be required for students to attend school. So why recommend? One thing this CNN Health article doesn't include is the rationale for including this brand new vax, which seems like a pretty important subject to cover. Thomas Massey points this out. Here's a slide from the CDC meeting today on childhood vaccines. Children 5 to 17 aren't even measurable on this graph, so why would CDC recommend COVID jabs be part of the childhood vaccine schedule? By the way, this is people in the hospital testing COVID positive, not due to COVID. Some are suggesting the motivation is the liability protection the recommendation provides. If jab makers can get approval and recommendation for children, there is permanent zero liability under the legal shield of the National VICP of 1988.
So we called the CDC and asked a simple question. Do you deny that once the COVID vaccine is added to the childhood immunization schedule, many schools and states will require it based on your recommendation? And of course, they know that's true. We caught them lying, so they didn't even bother to respond to us because apparently we're not American citizens and don't deserve a response. Does not enhance your faith at all.
We're all still experiencing the fallout of other rush decisions, supposedly in the name of health and science, and the corporate-controlled media has gaslit us every step of the way. Here's Bill Maher.
The pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in math and reading. See, right away, I got to say, this pisses me off. I see these headlines all the time. The pandemic didn't do that. The way we handled the pandemic did that. The pandemic certainly was a thing. But let's not just say the pandemic, because it was not written in stone that we had to handle it the way we did. They shouted down the idea that it might have escaped from a lab.
Right.
That was somehow racist,
right,
as opposed to somehow if you believed that it came from the wet markets, you were a Democrat, and if you believed it came from the lab, you were a Republican. This is ridiculous.
The propaganda machine has been fueled by a lack of true sources. Media is given a corporate directive, and the puppets assemble to gather experts to source for their predetermined narrative. Front Page Mag. Is rainbow fentanyl a threat to your kids this Halloween? Experts say no, NPR assures. Fetterman's use of captions is common in stroke recovery, experts say. The Washington Post wheedles. The media is notorious for sticking experts say in any story, no matter how irrelevant. Where are the experts at to explain this claim?
Yes, our economy is strong as hell.
89% of voters do not think the economy is strong, but rather believe we're in a recession. And that includes 84% of voters who approve of Biden's job performance. So Biden says the economy is strong, and he also had this to say.
Let's debunk some myths here. My administration has not stopped or slowed U.S. oil production.
Where are the fact checkers on this? Media Research Center. Fact check. Joe Biden canceled the Keystone XL pipeline on his first day in office. Here's a couple of other headlines. Federal oil leases slow to a trickle under Biden. Biden halts oil, gas leases amid legal fight on climate cost. Now, when the media is selectively fact-checking or can't find a thinly veiled expert, they bring on laughable contributors like Russia hoax pusher Peter Strzok. Despite this excerpt from his FBI termination letter. As I considered all the known facts associated with the adjudication of your case, it was difficult to imagine another incident like yours which brought so much discredit to the organization. So MSNBC decided he'd be perfect to interview. And here's how that went.
I've not heard one utterance of connecting the dots from Christopher Wray in the days after the deadliest attack on the U.S. Capitol in our, in history.
Nicole, I think that's right. And I think if you look at the scale in terms of the threat to democracy, 9/11 was a tragedy. We lost thousands of lives in a horrific way that we still mourn to this day. But when you look at something that is an attack on democracy, something that could actually bring about a fundamental change to American governance as we understand it, 9/11 is nothing compared to January 6th.
Wow. What a slap in the face to the thousands of families who lost loved ones on 9/11. And that day did fundamentally change all of our lives with the rushed passage of the Patriot Act, making it easier for the government to spy on ordinary Americans, among other things. Speaking of MSDNC, it and CNN are making no apologies for not covering the Hunter Biden laptop, which some argue was actually a threat to our democracy because it buried relevant information just before a major election. The defense? He was never arrested and not a candidate himself. So if the laptop had been Don Jr.'s, would they have turned a blind eye? The computer store owner where Hunter left his laptop is now suing CNN, Hunter, the Biden campaign, and others for alleged claims of defamation, civil conspiracy, and civil aiding and abetting. It was not Russian disinformation as they had claimed. The lawsuit follows the concession by several legacy media outlets of the authenticity of the laptop. Also holding the propaganda puppets accountable is Kari Lake, and the elitist talking heads hate her for it. CNN's Jake Tapper tweets, gubernatorial nominee pledging to only accept election results if she wins. Except that's not what she said. Take a listen.
The question is, will you accept the results of your election in November?
I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result.
If you lose, will you accept that?
I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result because the people of Arizona will never support and vote for a coward like Katie Hobbs, who won't show up on a debate stage. She's single-handedly destroying a 20-year tradition of gubernatorial debates because of her cowardice. So I know already, no momentum behind her. The polls are in our favor, and we're going to win this election. I'm 100% confident of that.
So he embellishes what Lake said, but ignores that Stacey Abrams actually did not accept her loss. NPR, Abrams lost by nearly 55,000 votes and never did concede. Lake has been calling out the corrupt corporate media for these reporting inconsistencies.
Let's talk about election deniers. Here's 150 examples of Democrats denying election results. Oh, wow, look at this. This is from Joe Biden's press secretary. Reminder, Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Georgians and Stacey Abrams. Democrats saying that. Is that an election denier? Oh, look at this. Just heard Republican Ryan Costello said it would be difficult for Stacey Abrams to win because she lost her state bid, but yet she's still claiming she never lost. This is over Hillary Clinton. Trump is an illegitimate president. Is she an election denier? This one says, was the 2016 election legitimate? It now definitely is a question worth asking. That's the Los Angeles Times. So it's okay for Democrats to question elections, but it's not okay for Republicans. It's a crock of BS. Every one of you knows it. We have our freedom of speech, and we're not going to relinquish it to a bunch of fake news propagandists.
And roasting them while she's at it.
You don't have a mask on anymore. What's going
we're
on?
outside. Do you have a minute to
well,
chat?
We're 6 feet apart.
Do you have a minute to chat?
I'll do an interview.
Okay.
As long as it airs on CNN Plus. Does that still exist? I didn't think so, because the people don't like what you guys are peddling, which is propaganda. Thank you.
Bringing you what's ignored, sensationalized, misleading, or just plain false. That's your media malfeasance for the week. Follow Christy Lee TV on all your favorite social media platforms or join my community. Subscribe to ChristyLeeTV.locals.com.
I think Kari Lake is a great comedian. She makes me laugh.
That was awesome. That was great. I can't wait for the day I get to burn a CNN reporter like that. That'd be so awesome.
Hey, by the way, everybody, this show has almost 1,000 more paying subscribers than CNN Plus.
Whoa.
So, yeah, there you go.
Well, the
CNN Plus
about
had
1,000 times better.
It had a $300 million budget. I just like to, I punch up. CNN Plus is above us budget wise. So I'll punch up.
Fair enough. Yeah. Love it.
So, what did you guys think about it? So, Ryan, Scott, you guys are now like part of the show. You can comment on the story and you can pick the next clips because Scott brought some clips. Ryan's got some clips. He's done a lot of great work this week, every week. So Scott has access to the show card. Let's get Ryan access to the show card, and then we'll do a round robin. But first, What did you think of Christy Lee's reporting?
I thought she did a great job as always. Big fan of Christy Lee. She like one of the things that I thought was just so hilarious, and this just goes along with the rebunked theme, right? You know, all the things that they called us crazy for before is now being reported as mainstream news. It's like the thing that always irritates me is like, I think Mars said something like, let's see. Oh yeah, it wasn't COVID that caused all these problems. It was the lockdown that caused all these problems. Like you know, and then the audience claps, and I'm like, get out of here, dude, get out of here. Like that was us saying that. Now you can't adopt our anyway. It's just frustrating to see that.
There's another choice that says all the above.
Yeah.
They made it in the lab. They made the lockdowns. They ran scenarios, knew what was going to happen. They took advantage of it, and they kept everyone in the dark and got you to adopt a synthetic gene concoction without informed consent, which would make the Nazis blush. Mm-hmm. They'd be like, whoa, like we thought we were doing something bad. Look what these guys in the future are doing. So, yeah, the mandating of children needing to have the gene concoction in their bloodstream, have a little mRNA playing in there. Isn't that some sort of abuse? Like, you're going to treat people for something that they're not really in danger from. And there's a whole bunch of risks that they're not telling people until later. And they're happy to tell you later. Borla and these people are happy to tell you 2 years later after you made life-changing decisions, health-altering decisions, chronic, maybe ailment developing decisions, that it's not supposed to do the things that you thought were the reason to take it in the first place.
Totally.
And both of you guys have been on the crest of the wave way before people like are picking up on it. What do you think it means to live in a society where we no longer get informed consent? And does it have some sort of relationship to slavery?
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ryan? I think you're muted, Ryan.
See, he did the same thing you did.
Have I been on this whole time?
You were muted the whole time.
No, have I been on the whole time? Jesus Christ, guys, I'm sorry. I've been sitting here waiting for you guys. I thought I wasn't on the show yet.
No, we brought you in once or twice.
Fantastic. Well, I apologize to the audience.
Good. This is how it works.
Bring me in. That's fantastic. Well, I unfortunately don't have much time left. I'm super tired, but what's going on, guys? I've been kind of jumping in and out. So I did this to everybody.
I'm glad I wore my T-Lab shirt yesterday, so we weren't like wearing the same thing. Ryan
now? And I do that all the time. Every time we go to a public event, I always wear mine thinking I'm going to represent and thinking he'll maybe wear something different, but we always wear the same shirt at the same time.
It's a good problem to have, though. But again, just so we're clear, I'm sorry, guys. I did not know I was on the show yet. I would have been engaging. I thought you were going to bring me in. My apologies. So.
No, we after we came out of the Christy Lee clip, I called on you, but maybe you just didn't hear it. That's all.
I wasn't. I ran to the bathroom. I wasn't in the
room. That's what happened. Good. Calls, but now you're here. All right. So because we have an unscripted, unstructured show, I was just saying you and Scott both have access to the show card, so you can pick some clips. I know you've been streaming for many hours already today, so I'm going to use your time wisely. And we'll go to a next section of news and get your comment on it. But the question I asked was this involuntary getting, like, they used a lot of propaganda, psychological warfare to get people to adopt the gene therapy. They used fear, peer pressure, all these different things to get people to adopt it. Now they're mandating it. CDC wants it mandated for kids to go to the public indoctrination camps. And I said, what kind of world do we live in where we no longer have informed consent? And is that state of not having informed consent some sort of slavery?
Yes. We could point that out to a lot of different degrees, with debt, slavery, or I was just talking about world hunger in a concept of that UN article. I don't know if you guys saw that, where an article was written arguing that world hunger is maintained because it allows slave labor, essentially. But it's just one more way that we are being coerced into a controlled structure, in my opinion. But I also think that the injection itself could lead to that. Like, to potentially whether or not there's something internal there's a lot of different discussions, conspiracy theory and whatnot, about what might be inside the injection and what that could lead to. Those are valid concerns to have as well. But yes, absolutely. The childhood schedule thing, I think I saw the clip playing. It's obviously meant to lead, as RFK pointed out, to the indemnity, because it's recommended there. It doesn't even have to be mandated by many of the states, as long as they recommend it and have the approvals on the shelf they're not using. They have earned indemnity, just like the Act of 1986 for the rest of them. I mean, it's unquestionable. So to a degree, we already kind of lost that battle right there. Sorry for 1 second, guys.
Yeah. So I think that just coming out of that is when I saw it, when they came out with AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, and the British Oxford vaccine, they've got these 4 different concoctions. Everybody's taken the first jab because they wanted to keep grandma safe. Then they're coming out with, they say you're going to need boosters because it doesn't give you lifetime immunity. And then it became, you can cross pollinate. You can mix and match these vaccines, bro. If you got J&J, you can go get Pfizer booster as long as you're boosted. And it became more about compliance than ever it was science. And now they've continued on. I mean, people, they don't even care that Borla has like 5 jabs and Paxlovid twice and COVID 3 times. Like, they're not, the contradictions are no longer triggering red flags for them. I don't know how it works on their side, but I'm interested in the psychology of it.
But is that the case, though? Right? That I'm with you 100%. Yeah. But I think we need to enter into a new phase of understanding, or at least ask the question about whether or not we've always been the majority, at the very least, if not, we are now. And I think it's a big, important thing to ask, because like what you just described, like, for instance, just look at the bivalent. If we know that only 5% of eligible people, less than that in most places, have gotten it, How do you misunderstand? How do we misunderstand that? What it shows us is that ultimately people do not want to do this, even if they've already taken 2 or 3 shots. I mean, that's very clear. So I think it's about realizing that people are becoming generally skeptical of the government in every way. Ukraine, these things are translating in a lot of different ways. And I know you guys have been pointing that out as well. I think we just need to, at the very least, ask that question and what that would mean. I was thinking about this the other day about whether that means that whether I'm tackling this problem the right way, if that's the case. Like, we always need to keep spreading information. That's always going to have to happen. But let's just say 95% of people out there see this. A big portion of them go along with it because of politics and so on. And a big portion of them see through it, but don't say anything because they believe the minority, right? So essentially what we're doing is yelling the information and everyone's like, yes, we agree. But they have different ways of going about it. So how do we deal with that? Like, how do we get that grouping of people to realize that they are the majority and actually change that? That's where my mindset's been lately. Like, how do we address that problem differently?
I think it's tied to action. And the way to get people into action is you give them strong juxtapositions. You observe that, like, the vaccine is like becoming less effective, and yet they're going to charge us 4 times as much for the less effective thing. Right. So less people are adopting their bullshit product. So they're like, just raise the price 4 times. We'll get the same amount of money because they got to please their shareholders. That's what it's, at the end of the day, there's a lot of that. I mean, they don't do it for the benefit of the shareholders. They do it for the benefit of the people who own the company, and the shareholders are like the prophylactic they put on it to make it publicly acceptable to fuck like they do.
I'm actually pretty surprised that they put the price up. Like, that's at the timing of it all. I mean, how do you not look like profiteers in that moment? When it actually happens. And I mean, I don't even want to say that, because I do think that there's a nefarious element to Pfizer itself as well as everybody else. But I just wonder if
consciousness, they have to do stuff like that. And that if it was a good thing,